Hi, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Tia and Jill.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be back here with you on this wonderful Wednesday.
Yes, and we have a very special guest with us here today. But before we
Wait, I have
introduce
to point down.
him, I know.
I'm not good directionally. Like, here's Tia, here's Ann.
But we want to hear where you're listening from. So please put in the comments, hello, say hello to us. And write where you're listening from. We love to see where you're listening from, and where you're at. Some of you listen every week, and you're in different places, and we love to see that. And then we also want to hear your perspective in the comments. So please add your perspective as we go through our topic of retail readiness, and ask your questions in the comments because we'll answer them.
Yeah. No, we're excited to be here. And if it is your first time, we do this every Wednesday at noon Eastern. And if you aren't familiar with Tia and I, we love to talk about food safety and quality. And really, like, how do we help set people up for success in this space? And how do we help develop technical experts that transition to be really strong technical leaders? So that way we can really help our organizations when they're managing risk and looking at food safety and quality. And so that's what we do here every Wednesday.
Absolutely. And this month, we've really been focusing on small business because it's Small Business Month. And we've really been talking about different things that's specific to small business. But you all know we also see it in large manufacturing, large retail as well. But we really wanted to focus the topics on, and this is our last one, talking about retail readiness. So if you're a small business out there and you are looking to get into the retail space, whether it's Target, Trader Joe's, Walmart, Whole Foods, this is the one you want to listen to. And Ann is the person you want to know.
Yes. So, Ann, we are so excited. Really, we are so excited and glad that you're able to join us today because you're going to offer our audience a whole new perspective when it comes to the behind the scenes and getting ready for retail. And I say that because I think in food safety and quality, depending on where we are and how our organization approaches preparing for retail, sometimes we're on the back end when they're like, hey, we just started, we're going to be doing some work with a Target or a Costco or whomever. Can you send over our food safety policy? That's usually the amount of involvement that we get. And then that starts the like waterfall and domino of questions. So we're happy to have you here so that we can talk about some of this on the front end.
Yes. So. Well, I am excited to be here, and thank you so much, Jill and Tia, and the audience out there, and looking to get some more understanding and knowledge on what it all takes to be retail ready. So it's going to be a fun day. I'm excited about it. To kind of kick it off and talk a little bit about who I am. So I own a small boutique company here in Minneapolis that works with and helps really a lot of entrepreneurs and product companies navigate the retail space. And especially with big box stores, Target, Costco. I have a number of brands in both retailers, and it's all about getting the products on the shelf. So I work with a lot of different brands, a lot of great entrepreneurs. And like you said, I mean, there's so many great entrepreneurs that have a product, they manufacture that product. And then it's like, what do I do with my product? How do I get into retailers? That's where I help them. But then it's all about, too, are they in compliance with all the food safety, the audits, everything that they have to have in place that these retailers are really looking for and that they require. So yeah, I'm so excited to be here today. We can chat about retail.
Awesome. Yes. Well, and so even as we get started, because I think oftentimes people wonder, like, what brings people like to you, or what's kind of the thing? Is it the dream? Like, gosh, I started making this product and we're having some traction and I can't wait to get into, insert Target, Walmart, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods. Mm-hmm. What is it that
a lot of times a product will and I'll kind of use probably a Minnesota-based company. I won't say who, but if you're a Minnesota-based company and you're looking to create a product and you've created a great, amazing food and beverage product, a lot of the retail channel of where you start is your local area. Whether you start at farmers markets, whether you start at locally in smaller boutique companies or a smaller grocery company that is really local, like for example, Lunds and Byerly's here in Minneapolis, or if you're looking at Mariano's in Chicago. I mean, there's so many smaller retailers or where you start. Once you start to build that base and you understand how it is to distribute to a retailer, then you start branching out into bigger boxes. I mean, Target and a Walmart isn't probably somebody you're going to start out with, but they are somebody that as you continue to grow and scale your business effectively, they're going to be somebody you're going to start looking into. Or if you're a natural product, your channel that you're going to look at natural is your Whole Foods, your Trader Joe's, Lakewood, any type of co-ops, any type of definitely more natural that you want to get your product into. So I think it's important as you set yourself up for success to look at what is your channel strategy.
Yeah.
And I work on that with a lot of different products.
Yeah. And so I love that you brought up like the regional retailer going into the national retailer, even if your brand is going to be at their regional level for a period of time before you're national. It's different getting into a local retailer versus getting into some of these larger retailers like a Target. And we see it on the food safety side where someone comes to us and they're like, hey, Trader Joe's knocking at our door. We're already in this retailer, this local retailer. It should be easy to transition over. But they find that the larger retailers are asking more questions. They want more documentation. They want more processes. And so it's not as easy as it seems. Is that what you also see with your
Absolutely. I mean, there's even just a really small piece of it, like EDI, which is the electronic data exchange, right? It's how you get your POs. It's how you get your advanced shipping notices. There's a potential of a smaller local retailer that you don't need EDI in place, right? You're just getting the PO by email, you're fulfilling that PO. You don't have to have that. Well, when you get into a larger retailer, I mean, Target requires it, Walmart requires it, Costco requires. So there is now a provider you have to find, right? That is an EDI provider for your company. So it is a lot of different elements that it's different from a regional player versus when you get into a national chain. And there is that scope and capability as well as cost that comes along with it that, you start looking at as you can develop and to scale bigger.
Yeah.
And so that just as our audience is kind of wrapping their heads around kind of how this works as well, can you share with us, like when clients come to you, like how big are these companies? Are they still pretty small? Are they new? Have they been in business for a while? Can you share with us a little bit more about like what size of an organization is looking at being retail ready?
Yeah. That's a great question. A lot of times, my client base, it varies. It varies from a more established client that is in nationwide retailers, and they're just looking to tap into Target because that's one of the retailers they don't have within their portfolio. But then there'll be clients that I have that are just new. They're brand new to the business. They're looking for what is that expertise and how do you go to market from a channel strategy to what is that checklist that you need from a scalability, how I need to have all my processes in place. And then I also work with clients that are international, that they are looking to get into the United States and what type of skills and elements and processes that they need to have in place to get here local or get domestically versus internationally. Some of the elements I talk a lot about scaling effectively with every manufacturer is what is their method of manufacturing, right? Do they manufacture it themselves? Do they have a 3PL? Do they have a co-packer? I mean, how do they get their product from A to B from a manufacturing or A to C, right? We talk about even just a finished product. Do they have finished labels? Do they have a finished product? I have a company that I'm working with in Canada, and we are just getting to the finished product piece of it, where, you know, we had to go through the entire creative on packaging, the whole production. What did it look like? What is our box count going to be? To, you know, what do you look for a master case pack? And that really then goes into, are your UPCs GS1 compliant? So there's a lot of these elements that you have to look at. Do you have insurance? Is it an aggregate of 2 million? You know, what certificates and registrations do you have? Do you have your product sheets, your price lists, a sales sheet, a sales presentation? All of that goes along with, when you start scaling, do you have this off of your checklist that you can achieve?
Yeah.
You know, as you're talking, Ann, you hear me chuckle, because I think it reminds me of food safety, when people are like, food safety, check, 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 should be easy enough. And you're like, no, there's so many layers.
Yeah.
There's so many details and complexities that really, until you've walked these shoes, you don't even know what those are. And it sounds like when you're explaining getting ready, once again, not as easy as like, well, hey, yeah, let's just go sell over here. Like, no, there's a big list of things.
Yeah. And a lot of times it comes down to too, what the retailer's requirements and regulations are. So, I mean, that's going to make a difference too, on whether you have it ready, or you're certified, or you're registered, or you have an audit in place, and so on and so forth.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm curious on how long is the process when a client comes to you? And I kind of want to ask it in two different ways. Where does a client come to you and they feel like they're prepared, but they're not, and they want to be in target within 3 months, you know, and you're like, whoa, it's going to be more like 8 to 12 months instead of 3 months. You know, does people come in with knowing how long it's going to take, or do you have to reset those expectations?
I do. You know, that's a great question. I do have to reset those expectations. And it kind of goes back to our conversation we had briefly on the regional players versus the big box retailers, because a regional player, you can get in a lot quicker, right? So let's say you're presenting to a 4 to 10 chain grocery store, and it's in your local area. They are probably looking at products constantly to potentially bring in. And so you may be able to be on shelf within 3 to 4 months. When you look at bigger boxes, Target, Walmart, Costco, those are Albertsons, Safeway. I mean, those are retailers where, you know, they only have line reviews potentially once a year. And those line reviews is what you're really, you know, hoping to get into. You get the invite, quote unquote, to get into a line review. And then once you're in the line review, you know, your product is going through the process of being determined if you are going to be set in those stores or not. If the chain accepts it, you know, you won't look to reset until probably 9 to 10 months later. So there is definitely much longer lead time in a big box. And again, that goes back to all the processes they have in place and what the requirements that they're asking for before you're ever hitting that shelf space. So there is a lot of expectation that I have to reset with a lot of different products that they think you can just go sell it into, you know, Walmart or Target today, and it's going to be on shelf in 6 months. That's not the case. You know, you're waiting for that line review, and you're waiting for that timing to be just right.
Right. And that's really great information for our audience, because even from a food safety standpoint, you're talking about, you know, you have to get in and then you have to wait to the reset in order to get it on the shelf. In order to even get in, you know, they're asking for those documentation, those processes, those food safety documentations. And from a food safety standpoint, though, that documentation, your records, the process build, that can take 6 to 12 months. And so really one of the things that we've been focusing on this month with small businesses is really to tell, you know, our audience that the sooner you start getting prepared, because you know that's where you want to go. You know, even if it's like, okay, I want to be in Target within 2 years. Start now. Developing that documentation.
I like that now.
Understanding what you need, because, you know, it could take you a year, you know, to even get ready.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell all my clients, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely a marathon because, like you said, I mean, if you are interested in Target, you have to start putting pieces in place and you start having conversations early on. And I mean, Target, they're just going to look at you for a long time. They want to know how successful you are, how many doors you're in, how many stores you are throughout the country to really determine if that's an item or an innovative item that they're looking to bring in.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And as you think about, so you talk about prepare for a marathon, not a sprint, kind of as you kind of reset these expectations for clients or, people who are interested, what surprises them the most about like being on this journey or starting on this journey?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has surprised me the most probably in the last 2 years or since we hit the pandemic has been it's a labor issue. It's a labor issue for every retailer. So that's why, potentially the category could be reviewed twice a year, but the categories now are not being reviewed twice a year. They're only being reviewed once a year because the labor issue to reset that entire aisle or that entire, category is a lot different today than what it was pre-pandemic. So that is definitely a surprise that I think every entrepreneur it goes back to what Tia just said, right? You've got to start now and you've got to start having those conversations and building that rapport with these retailers because it's going to take a little bit longer to potentially get in there, or that once you do get awarded the business, it's going to take the lead time to get on the shelf and to make sure that the reset happens is going to be a little bit different than it was previously. So that's a huge mindset shift a little bit for us, not only as we represent products, but for entrepreneurs that are looking to pitch, that just keep that in the back of their head is that labor is an issue out there for everyone. Whether it's grocery, whether it's hospitality, whether it's restaurants, I mean, it's just an issue that we have throughout the country.
Yeah. So start now. Start now.
Start pitching and building that relationship now, but make sure you have all the pieces in place in order to do it.
Right. Exactly. So, our audience our audience is filled with food safety nerds, right? And one thing that we talk about all the time in food safety is that our organizations are moving and growing, and food safety is lagging. And then when they want to do something like get into a Target or start a new product, whatever happens to be, they come to food safety and they're like, oh, we need this information. And it's like, oh, that's going to take a little bit of time to build because we're doing a whole another job, right? And then we have to also build. So I'm kind of curious from the food safety standpoint, do you find that your clients are prepared with food safety, or is it something that's like, these are the food safety requirements and they're like, oh man, I didn't know that?
I think, generally the clients that I'm working with have the knowledge and have the education of food safety in terms of what is needed, because I work with big boxes that they have national presence or they have retailer presence existing. So they know that they have to have, whether it's SQF certified, whether it's FDA, what type of certifications they need to have in place. So a lot of mine have that. Although I have to say, I did work with one client that didn't have an SQF, and I'm like, you have to have SQF because Target will never look at you without that. So, and Walmart won't either, and neither will Costco. So there are definitely those requirements that everybody needs to have in place. I mean, from a food safety, make sure you're FDA, make sure you have your audits in place, the GMP audit. I mean, there's just so many. You probably both have a checklist of what you need to have in place in order to go to big boxes. But have those in place because it is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And they take time. They take time to build.
Do.
It takes time to get an SQF certification. It's not something you can just flip a switch and say, "Oh, we want to be certified next week."
Right.
It's not going to happen.
It's even just attribute certifications, whether you're kosher, whether you're gluten-free, whether you're non-GMO. I mean, you have those as part of your attributes for your product, highly, highly, highly recommend to get your certifications for them too. Yeah. And they, like you said, they do take time, but it enhances your product and it puts you in a better selling proposition for going to retailers.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up the certifications like gluten-free, non-GMO, because a lot of people feel like you can just turn that on too. You can't. It takes some time, especially now with where we are when you talk about labor. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's even hard to get an audit. That takes months to get someone into your facility to complete the audit.
Yeah, and especially if you're looking at, the retail readiness and go into retailers, they're going to ask for that audit. So I would, that's one of the things, start looking at early on, put that into your checklist and practice of what operational needs you have and you need to get complete. Put that already at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, ladies, I happen to see we have another food safety nerd with us.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul. It's great to have you join us today. And I'm sure you would have some fun stories to tell about this journey as well. So we're glad to have Ann here sharing her perspective with us.
Yes.
So Ann, even when we talk about about some of these companies that are getting ready to move into this space and even working on the food safety end, because even though we may know, hey, we need to have SQF or something else, usually each organization has some other nuances that need to come along with it. So with the companies that you work with, who do you typically see leading some of the food safety initiatives to help, fill in some of those gaps and kind of do that checklist?
I think it's definitely the product companies that have a bigger national footprint, as well as been in the business longer, that understand that these are necessary needs. I think if you're new and starting out, there's not as many quote unquote checklists, that they know that they have to have or what retailers are requiring. So you do see it definitely from the more national brands. And be honest, I mean, food safety, I don't dabble in that much, not like you guys do, right? I kind of am more of, this is what you need from the retailer side. So I just make sure that they kind of check off the SQF, check off the FDA, in the audit. But I see it a lot more where those are checked off from a national footprint and a brand that is really well known.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And that's why we do what we do, right? We
need both of you. Absolutely.
Helping people get to the point where, when they come to you and they're trying to get into Target, they can check that they have these things because they've done the legwork ahead of time. So that's really our mission, even as we think about food safety culture, right? That's such a broad term and people are like, what does it mean? A piece of that is that you are working on food safety every day and you're prioritizing it and you're ensuring that it is your number one priority. And that means that you are building those programs, you're building that culture, and you're continuing to strengthen it over the years. And so when you're ready for something like a Target, even if you're a small company that's growing and you're trying to get into those national chains, you're prepared for it because you've thought about it.
Right. And you've thought about it from even just a facility standpoint. I mean, it was interesting just this morning, I was helping a client fill out a registered facility, questionnaire that they had to ask, how many exits, emergency exits, do you have enough spacing in the aisles of your production run? I mean, there's a lot of pieces that come into play that not only is your food, the production of your food compliant, but also is your facility compliant,
right?
As you go forward and working with retailers, because that's the expectation level that retailers look for.
Yeah, and people don't think about that. But no. Jill and I, we've both worked in facilities. We've been super interconnected with even other functions. I've led maintenance. I've been in operations, and Jill has this experience working with multiple functions. We know that type of intricacies, and so that's why it's our passion, right? To really be able to connect the dots between food safety and other things, and really get companies, prepared to do something like retail, or even just to sell their product and not have an issue.
Right. I mean, because you don't want to have a recall. I mean, you do not want to have a recall, right? We as a vendor representation, or even the owner of the entrepreneur, the company, they don't want to have to go to a retailer and say, hey, we have an issue here. We've got to recall all the product. I mean, it's a lot of work on both ends, right? And it's, you just don't really want to have to do that if you can avoid it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and really, when you think about it, this relationship is really this partnership, because once those brands come together, like, brand risk exists for everybody. Right. But now, like, if I'm a Target, I'm also thinking about this other organization that I'm bringing in and I'm representing. I'm selling their product, and their reputation is also could impact mine. Yeah. And so it's not, like you said, it's not just food safety. It's about general safety and all of the other parts that go along with how well does that represent the brand.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's the mission, right, of every retailer, that they're protecting the public health. It's the public health, right? It's their consumer or their customers. Yeah. They're protecting the brand. They're partnering with the supporter. They're protecting themselves. I mean, there's a lot of risk on everyone's really side of how you look at this, that everybody's looking to make sure it's a win-win situation in a partnership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and even as you've been navigating this with, different clients and different big box retailers or retailers, what type of shifts or trends have you been seeing with maybe what they're looking for or what they're asking for? What's kind of going on in that space?
So right now, I mean, it's very interesting, right? It's all about innovation. It's all about what makes your product unique and different than someone else. So a lot of the trend is, and we'll continue to see this grow, is plant-based. You're going to see more and more plant-based out there. You're going to see more and more shelves that are going to be specific to plant-based products. Some are in frozen right now. That's probably the biggest one that you're seeing. We're seeing a lot of, dairy-free, soy-free. It's going back to kind of everybody's looking for that natural, clean product. I think I mentioned earlier, the more attributes you have, that makes your product a little bit more unique. Right. Is a lot of what a lot of retailers are looking for. How do you define a snack product that is different than the overall snack product that is out there today, right? How do you make your corn chip different? Whether it's new flavors, new innovation, you're making it more healthy for the consumer. That's a lot of what retailers are looking for. What is that fun, new, different type of innovation than what they carry today that makes them stand out?
Right. Exactly. And I'm glad you brought up innovation, because that's also a really big thing. Once you get into a place like Target, they're going to be asking you what's next, right? And what I find with clients and even organizations I worked with before is that once they're in, they start thinking about other products. They're trying to hit another deadline, right, to get this new product on the shelf. And what I found is that, they might not have the right processes to be able to move. And again, they want something in 3 months, when really sometimes the innovation process can take a year to even do.
Right.
So it's like, again, start now. But our big thing is really how, helping organizations integrate food safety into that innovation process, so that as you're developing new products, you're thinking about the food safety element along with it, so you can move a little bit quicker. Do you find that your clients are coming back and thinking about, okay, how do I innovate my product? How do I get new products on the shelves after they've already been in?
They have. I think every entrepreneur out there has a vision, right? Has a vision, and how they keep thinking, and they keep looking at what is those products in the pipeline, right? What are those new innovative products not that they can have in the pipeline? So that's a lot about the visionary entrepreneur mindset, right? They make a product and they're like already thinking about what is that next product. Right. So that's kind of the fun of it, right? It's just not the flavors. It's maybe a mix of, if they're doing some fun jar of cashew butter, and maybe they're thinking about almond butter, but then they're thinking about how can I make this a little bit different, right? How can I make it more of a solid? I'm making this up, but how they can make it something different. But there's a lot, I think, from every entrepreneur that I work with, or any entrepreneurs out there, they're always thinking about innovation in the pipeline and how they can continue to grow their business.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty much always a given that I always, when I talk with them, they're like, oh no, I'm thinking that this is my product today, but this is the product that I'm thinking about in the next year or two.
Right, exactly. And we always say, like, that could be new food safety risk. It might be a new supplier. And sometimes if you're not thinking food safety, you don't recognize those risks.
Right. No, absolutely. And sometimes I'm even going, well, what's the shelf life of that? Let's say all of a sudden you want to make a fun new cupcake, and the cupcake goes in bakery, but your shelf life's only like 5 days. You're thinking about what's a new different product that you can make that you can have a longer shelf life to continue to innovate. Because once you get, whether any retailer, right, you go through a category review, and let's say you're awarded the business and you go on shelf space, well, you want to think about what is that next product I want to bring to market for them to put on the shelf the following year. So you are constantly innovating and thinking, and entrepreneurs do an amazing job of that.
Good. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, so even with that, Anne, I'm always curious because, right, there's many different paths to be able to handle that capacity that's being requested. So do you see any pattern when it comes to are most people or most companies, are they manufacturing themselves? Are they using co-manufacturers? Is there any specific path that you see people taking as they're really kind of moving into this space and kind of preparing for like these new products that they're going to have to create?
I think that so many different companies really go down the first path of creating the product their own, right? They're manufacturing it on themselves, or might be coming out of their kitchen. And, then they've got a storefront, or then they decide to go in a small co-man space. And from that co-man space, then their orders continue to grow. And they're like, I need to start looking at a co-packer. I need to start looking at my own, or being their own manufacturer. They, if they have the funds and they've been invested, they're going to look at having their own manufacturing space. So there is a progression and saying, how fast are you growing? And then how fast can you manufacture? There might be also a lot of smaller retailers, smaller brands that I work with. They may only produce once a quarter. They manufacture, they got a longer shelf life. Their shelf life's 2 years. And they only manufacture like once a quarter now, or production. And they may look at, hey, I'm getting more now as they're approaching more retailers, they're getting more orders, that changes your production. But it will be whether you own it yourselves or you have a co-manufacturer, and what that co-manufacturer's capability is too. Because you want to pick, in all honesty, as you go through this process of scaling yourself, when you pick a co-packer, you want to make sure that co-packer can grow with you. Because the last thing you want to do, right, is you're growing quickly, you're with that co-packer, and a year later, you got to find a new co-packer. And you don't want to do that, right? So make sure, I think, do the due diligence of when you're looking for co-packers and you're researching co-packers, that you look for a co-packer that can grow with you as you grow.
Right. And I feel like that's a part of the readiness with retail, because, people, companies aren't really thinking that ahead sometimes, where, again, like, you need to start thinking about that now. I always tell clients or people that we're talking to is that, you're not going to be the same size company you are today into the future, unless you want to be, right? And you're really focused to continue to be where you are. But most people want to grow. They want to sell more. They want to be, international one day. So you have to start thinking about that strategy now and how you're going to get from point A to point B to point C, and start prepping early enough. Otherwise, it's not going to fit within the timeline you have in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got to look at a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year, and a 10-year plan. Yeah. I mean, where do you want to grow and how big do you want to be?
Right.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Great point.
Oh, and that's one of the things that Tia and I really focus on helping, organizations understand, because we get so excited, like all of a sudden, somebody's interested in products, or we have, sales that, we hoped for, but like here they are. And as we are making, as companies make those adjustments, then that's where we start to see what we call it the gap, where like business growth is way up here, but our food safety is really not at that same spot. And so, how do we help them kind of incrementally make those shifts to close that gap? Because we know, right, it's not just throw everything at it right now, because that's not the budget. That's not the way the cash flows. But really, like, how do you do it in a very practical way so that you're still managing risk, but you're still really helping grow and move in that direction? And so that's why I think it's so exciting when you talk about retail readiness, because there's definitely some like larger milestones, like having SQF is usually one of those milestones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and you need to have those in place. I mean, you're kind of like the step before me, right?
Right.
As they look at developing a product and manufacturing and production. I mean, you're definitely that step before they look at the retail side of it. Yeah. And it's important, they have that in place.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, recalls. And I was chuckling because just in a conversation earlier, actually last week with someone, they said, what still keeps people up at night in the food industry? And I'm like, well, at least in our area, recalls.
Right.
That's always so top of mind of like, are we, making sure we're protecting consumers, making sure we're not making people sick or even, worse, but like, then also that recall, like, because that you just need to move so quickly and really help protect consumers, brands, all of it.
Right. Absolutely, because the last thing you want is a bad review. Right. And, a lot of companies and a lot of websites, where you can put your review online, you don't want that bad review to show up. So it is important for the integrity of your brand. Yeah. To make sure that you're doing all of the checklist items and the food safety items and everything that you're in compliance, that you don't hit that. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm curious. So it's one thing that companies might not think about is trialing their product before it goes into a national chain. Do you help organizations, or do you make sure that they are running their product, making sure it's going to run effectively, making sure that they they can basically make their product to scale before they get into a national chain, so they won't have those type, when we talk about like bad reviews, right? Someone saying, oh, this cookie isn't as soft as it should be, or the color of this candy is so different than a strawberry, it doesn't really look right. Do you have clients kind of coming to you and either not doing the trialing or need help with the trialing or haven't thought about the trialing of their product before launch?
So we do talk about that. Great question, Tia. We do talk about that because there is that element, right? That you want to make sure the consumer really loves it and they understand it and they're going to buy it and you're going to get more people buying it, right? So, so I have talked to a lot of different clients about trialing, right? And some trial on their own, right? Their trialing may be farmers markets. They love to go to farmers markets. That's how they're trialing their product, right? And then they're getting a lot of feedback right there initially. There's other trialing that can be, I have an owner that loves to, he's a road warrior, right? He loves to go to grocery stores and he will try it in the parking lot. And there's people that have gotten like kind of really cool vans that have their branding throughout it. Yeah. And they'll trial, different products as they go around the country.
Yeah.
So there's that piece of it. There's the other piece of trialing that isn't really trialing, but it's actually having their product on their own website and having people buy from their website. A lot of different companies make it in subscription boxes. That's another great way to start your product, is to be in subscription boxes. It's not really trialing, but it's more of your finished product.
Yeah.
But you get great feedback from consumers on it.
Yeah.
So there is kind of that upfront type of trialing that you do. Or I've had, there's a lot of great retailers that have a pickup delivery service. And a lot of retailers, especially during the pandemic, would do sampling. So when you picked up your curb, your curb product, your pickup by curb, in your bag was, a little sample product of something. And that's another way you get your free product out there from sampling, right? Coordinate with a retailer. You're not in that retailer yet, but coordinate with a retailer. You can give samples away for free of your product.
Right. And who doesn't love the free samples?
Right. Who doesn't love that?
Win-win all around.
Exactly.
Who doesn't love that? So, you get a little surprise and delight in your bag.
Yeah.
And you're willing to try it. So there's a lot of that too, from a trial, that a lot of different companies will work on.
Interesting. So how easy is it, if you're not in that retailer, how easy is it to go up and say, hey, I would love to give away some free samples of my product? How does that work?
It's really having the conversation with corporate, or having, even they may do it on a store by store basis. First of all, give it to them to try, right? Have them try it first. And then continuing to build that relationship is really where it's at. And then say, I've got 100 of these samples. I would really love to try it with your curbside pickup, and see if they go for it.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Like, even if you're not in that retailer, doing some trialing still at that retailer. That's interesting.
Yeah, I actually had a product company that I'm working with did it here in Minneapolis. And they did it with their curbside pickup, and it was a huge success. And it does kind of build that relationship, and it gets your brand on their radar, and the consumers love it. And then their feedback to the chain is, we love this product. I don't see it in store. And then they start to carry your product, right? It's a different type of selling process, but it works.
Yes. Interesting.
Yeah. And I love that power for consumers to be able to help drive that. Like you said, right? Hey, I love this product, but I don't see it in the store shelves. So I always think, making sure we recognize that's an important part of the process. And so, because I don't know about you, but every time, if I ever have something with a product where I'm like, oh, it maybe it didn't meet shelf life, or I find something in it, and I always think, you have to give that feedback, because if they don't know. So, but the same thing happens even here, where make sure you ask. I love encouraging consumers to be part of this process. And I know sometimes it's not their cup of tea, but it is so powerful for us when we're working in food, helping people in food, just to know if things are working right.
Yeah, it's powerful for the entrepreneur, right? Or for the founder and the owner. They want to know if their product's working too, and if everybody's going to love their product.
Exactly.
I think that's a really good way to always get your product out there.
And I'm
people at our stores probably, when I come through and they're like, did you find everything today? And I'll be like, well, I was looking for this, but I didn't find it. I always have feedback.
Exactly.
Me too.
But I must say, from a food safety standpoint, if you're looking to do something like this, make sure that you can track it. Because if you do have an issue, then you want to make sure that you know where your product went. And that's one thing that people might forget, is that even if you're doing trialing, even if you're doing sampling, you want to make sure that you're documenting those lots and where they went.
Yeah, and absolutely. One of the things too I love is QR codes. If it's a small sample of your product, put a QR code on it, right? Where they can actually, and you're not going to get everyone, right? But you are going to get some of the consumers that will give the feedback. Is another feedback loop that gives you more information.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, there's a word that you've said a few times during the show, and it's around relationships. And when we think about retail readiness, and I don't know if this has anything to do with food safety or not, but I think the big thing that you have said is that build those relationships with those retailers. Even if you're not in the store yet, you can still work on building that relationship. And I really see that as being a part of retail readiness, because once you're ready to hit go and they're like, yes, we're ready to have you on shelves, you already have that relationship with that retailer, and it can make that process so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, T, you kind of hit it on nail on the head. I mean, for me, it's about the retailer relationship, right? About the category, the different categories I work with, those buyer relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, start building those relationships and build them early and build them now, because you're right. It will help you set you up for future success to be in store presence. And it may be, I mean, just even at the local level, you're going into your local grocery store, you're going into your local food, Whole Foods, and you start building that relationship with that manager. Managers have a lot of autonomy in store.
Yeah.
So to bring in local products, especially today, it's all about the local community of the stores that you shop at, and what type of local presence they have. So start building that relationship with those local managers, and it can go a long way on success for bringing you in your product into that store. Right. And at least trialing. It might be only one store at a time, but at least you're building that relationship for a much broader success across, a wider variety, or the number of stores that they have nationally.
Yeah. That's a really good tip.
Yeah, and actually that was going to be my follow-up. Like, how do people even start doing this? So if they're listening today going, all right, I know our company has our eye on this retailer. How do we even start if they're not sure? So
a lot of it's just really bringing in a sample of your product. Store. Yeah, bringing in the sample of your product and going in and saying, hey, can I talk to the manager? And these entrepreneurs are great, right? And these founders, or myself. And we go in there and we're like, okay, we got this great product. Here are some of the wonderful attributes. We'd love for you to take a try, try it. And not necessarily at that point are you selling to take it in your store. You're just selling them for them to try it, right? Can we get some of your team members to try it? Can I drop off a number of samples so I can have it in your break room? And for everyone to try this. So you think about ways that you get more people to try your product, because a lot of times once they try a product, they love it. And then the manager will be like, yeah, let me take that in. Let's see if we can take that in for a test period. And always think about your upfront is always a test period, right? Because you don't know how long potentially it'll last or how well it'll sell, but you're hoping you knock it out of the park and it's selling off shelf like crazy. And then they start making your orders bigger.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. I love that tip. I hadn't even thought about that. No. But it makes sense. It makes sense. And, we've said this a few times, getting ready now to be able to do that type of relationship building is so important. Even from a food safety standpoint, if you haven't thought about getting a GFSI certification and prepping for that, you might go in and talk with a manager and you're like, hey, do you like this product? And it's great. I want to make sure, are you SQF certified? Are you? And then if you say no to those questions, then they're automatically going to say, I like this product. I want to push to have it in stores, but these are going to be hurdles for you.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, it's a hurdle if you're not, if your UPC is not GS1. That's the number one hurdle right there. Right? You want to make sure that is like your number one thing, that you make sure that all of your UPCs are GS1.
Yeah. And people don't think about that.
No, they don't. They just think, sometimes they go to this platform and they just get a UPC. Well, that UPC isn't going to do it for when you grow and you get bigger. So already, put that standard in place early on, and it's going to set you up for better success.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good tip, because I've worked with people where we had to go back and do all of our UPCs because of that. And even like scanning the product and talking through, okay, when someone scans, what do they see? And what's going to pop up in the system, like going through and making sure all that is set up properly, and that Julian dates and Best Buy dates are all flowing through the system correctly. And if you do that ahead of time, then you're not scrambling to do that when a retailer is asking for that information.
Right. Exactly. Because the last thing you want is all of a sudden they're not compliant, right? And the retailer's asking, and you're like, oh, and the retailer's like, I'll take you in. Can you give me, 400 cases tomorrow? And they're like, well, I've got the 400 cases in my warehouse. And then he's like, and it doesn't scan. I mean, it's not compliant, right? And then all of a sudden you're backpedaling. and you don't want to have to do that.
Right.
Oh.
Exactly.
So, and that really leads me, because we've talked about a whole bunch of different things today. So if someone is thinking, I want to be retail ready, what would be the top 2 or 3 recommendations that you would, have them start exploring and being prepared?
I would say probably number 1 is make sure you have a finished product. And that finished product being where you've got the label, you've got the packaging, you've got your case pack, and you've got your UPC. I mean, that's probably a big number 1 that has more elements to it, right? Where I rattled off just 5 of them. But I think that's probably the biggest piece, is that from a finished product, a packaging, a labeling is most important. Which really kind of falls into the GS1. I would say that's number 2. Okay. Making sure you have, all of your insurance in place too, is, probably number 3. Number 4, with your registrations and certifications, to make sure they're in place too, as well as food safety goes right up there from a certification to from an SQF, FDA, all those type of things, like audits in place for your facility that you need too. That was a lot more than just 2, Jill.
Well, but that's exactly why we have you here, because when people go, what do I need to do to get ready? What is this going to look like? Well, right, you just laid it out there for them.
Yeah. And you're really talking about, you have all these things in your compliant, because a lot of people are like, well, we have a finished product, we have a label, but the label's not compliant. You're saying you're organic, but you don't have the certification, so like you're really not compliant. You might feel like you have it and something to show, but your points are really around, make sure that you are compliant in these areas, because that's really going to push you forward.
Yeah, especially, I mean, there's another example, is that a lot of times they say, well, I'm manufacturing and I'm producing and my case count is 24. Well, a case count of 24 is great, but most retailers are going to look for a case count of 12, or less, because, right, they usually will think about how much is going to be on shelf and how much they want to store. And a lot of retailers don't want a lot in the back room to store, right? They're going to replenish some, but they're going to initiate another purchase order for you. So case count's another one that you don't want to make it too big, because the retailer is going to want it smaller than that.
Interesting.
So there's a lot. So that's kind of part of the retail readiness too. You're saying, yes, I have a package and I have a case count, where I'm going to go, your case count's a little bit too high for a retailer, and they're going to expect it to be at a much lower numbers.
Lower. Interesting.
Yeah. So if anybody out there is thinking about getting retail ready, make sure you get a hold of Ann.
Absolutely.
So Ann, I'm curious, I know there might be some more questions, but where can people find you?
Sure. I have my website at retailpartnersolutions.com, or you can just email me directly at ann@retailpartnersolutions.com.
Okay. And you're also
an Ann with no E, just so you know.
Okay. and if they're unsure or didn't catch that, can they find you on LinkedIn?
They can find me on LinkedIn too.
All right.
Absolutely. Ann Anderson.
Yes. And then we're always connected to Ann. So if you forget or whatever happens to be, or you're like, hey, Tia, I remember Ann being on your show. Can you connect us? Absolutely. We're here to connect you with Ann and any other person that's in our network.
Yes, absolutely. So Ann, I know we're coming up on the hour. Are there any last words of wisdom that you would like our audience to take away today?
I think really just look at your operations. Look at your operations and what you have put in place for A, your channel strategy, B, how you want to scale your business, how you want to approach retailers, what needs you need to have to approach retailers, and really kind of focus on where your growth can come from and how you want to grow.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep, it's all about the planning.
It is. It's all about the planning. Got to be organized.
And relationships, but start with planning
and relationships.
And build relationships.
Yes. That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
No, well, thank you both. This has been really a fun time.
Yes, it's been such a pleasure to have you on our show.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I feel honored to be with both of you. So this is great. And, if you got any more questions on retail readiness, just let me know.
Oh, we will. I know I've learned some new things today, so I'm sure our audience has too. So
absolutely. And if you are watching this as a replay, please add your comments and your questions to the stream, because we do go back and look at them and answer them. And then you can catch any of our replays on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe and click the bell for notifications, because they're typically up in a couple of days after our live.
Absolutely. So, Ann, it has been a pleasure having you on. We at Real Talk Food Safety will be back on next Wednesday at noon Eastern. Yes. And we're going to start our month in June with kind of an homage to World Food Safety Day. Yes. But really, we're going to dive into technical leadership and leadership mindset. Because as I alluded to earlier, right, we really like to set people up for success when you're a technical leader, because being in food safety and quality and these integrated parts and everywhere that we touch is a little bit different than some other leadership roles. And we understand those nuances. And so next month, we're going to talk all about how do you make that shift. Yeah. So
we look forward to seeing you all. Yes.
Thanks again, Ann.
All right. Thank you.